Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day two of Congressman Hank Johnson's four-series grants workshop. For those joining us for the first time today, I'm Kelly French Parker, Communications Assistant for Congressman Johnson. And for those returning, welcome back. We're excited to continue this journey with you as we dive deeper into the essentials of grant writing. Today's focus is Grant Writing 102, Budgeting, Evaluation, and How to Become Competitive. These key skills will help you strengthen your proposals and stand out in an increasingly competitive grant landscape. Congressman Johnson has long been a tireless advocate for empowering communities across Georgia's 4th District, especially by providing nonprofit organizations with the resources they need to thrive. This workshop and the entire Week of Hope is part of that ongoing effort. So get ready to take some great notes. And now, please join me in welcoming Congressman Hank Johnson.
Thank you, Kelly, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Congressman Hank Johnson, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to day two of my annual Grants Workshop series and to continue our Week of Hope, also known as Helping Other People Elevate. If you attended yesterday's session, please give me a thumbs up. Now, whether you're representing a nonprofit, working on a personal passion project, or just curious to learn more on grant writing, one thing unites us all: the need for resources in our communities. Grants can fund innovation and sustain community programs, but the competition to obtaining funding is real. There are countless wonderful ideas out there, but funding is limited. Today's workshop is focused on helping you rise above others and stand out as a strong, credible, and compelling applicant. I'm excited to welcome back Dr. Kimberly Eck. Dr. Eck has become a jewel to this grant series, as this is her third year partnering with my office for our grants workshop. And I thank you, Dr. Eck. She serves as the Senior Vice President for Research at Emory University. So you all please join me in giving Dr. Eck a warm welcome back. Dr. Eck?
Thank you so much, Congressman. I am delighted to come back for day two and for this to be my third year of participating in Hope Week. And I saw lots and lots of thumbs up. So that means you saw me yesterday and you said, I think I can take some more. I think I could stomach some more of that. So I'm so excited to talk with you more all about grant writing today. Okay, I'm going to share my slides here and we're going to get started. And so here we are. There's me. If you weren't here yesterday, I have an MPH and a PhD in epidemiology, and I have 16 years of experience in securing external funding. Half of that inside institutions of higher ed, half of that working with healthcare agencies, including safety net providers. I'm also a Nordic Fellow and an honorary member of the National Academy of Inventors, and I'm the founding and senior director of something called the Nordic Consultants Program, which is a national initiative that I lead, which is dedicated to expanding the research ecosystem by providing research development services to minority serving institutions and emerging research institutions. And my team has worked with over 170 emerging research institutions from all across the US, including the state of Georgia. So the helping other people elevate theme so resonates with me, and is also a part of what I do nationally. So I'm so happy to be here. Yes, it's me again. So that means more pom-poms, possibly more bad jokes, more grant insights, and lots of time for Q&A. Yesterday, we were able to answer about 30 Q&A questions that came in. I encourage you to enter those into the Q&A function. I'm going to present my slides today, and then at the end, we'll start walking through those questions that we have received. So hopefully, we'll be able to get to many of your questions before we sign off today. Okay, so here we are with the topics. Yesterday, we did about federal agencies. We talked about finding funding. We talked about making that go, no go decision. We talked about writing some key pieces, especially the work plan, the organizational capacity section, and that statement of needs sections. We kind of did deep dives. Today, We're going to talk about the budget justification. We're going to talk about evaluation, including the logic model. And we're going to tie in some other aspects about competitiveness. Now, you are welcome to ask questions specifically about budget evaluation competitiveness. And then as we have time, I'm happy to answer other questions about grant writing and grant seeking. So you are welcome to submit those into the Q&A. We're going to launch our first poll because I try to give the people what they want. These questions, your responses to these help me understand how much time to kind of spend on different areas of the presentation. So the first question, if we can launch that poll, how confident are you in your ability to develop a budget, a federal grant budget? I want to kind of take the temperature of the room here, see how we're feeling about this. We're going to see how we're feeling here. I know sometimes it's hard. You have one person who really likes spreadsheets and really likes a budget. And then you have another person who's like, way overwhelmed by the budget, doesn't want to see any of that. And then they marry each other. That's what happens. Guess which one I am? I like the spreadsheets. All right, let's see what those poll results are. Okay, all right, not confident, a little confident, sort of the lower end of the spectrum. So we've got some questions where we need to develop some confidence about this. Okay, so then follow up, next poll. What makes you the most nervous about developing a federal budget? Let's see. I put math on there. Because that might make you a little nervous. Like I said, I know some people that are not spreadsheet people. Maybe it's all of them. We're gonna see. When I teach this to grad students, we do an exercise where I describe a project and they have to budget what they think it's gonna cost. And then I also create a budget. And usually the students on average, I'm about 6 times more expensive than what the students think because there's so many costs you don't think of. All right, let's see. What are people nervous about? Not knowing the exact cost of a future expense. Okay, we could talk about that. Asking for too much, asking for too little, budgeting around category. People, you're good at math, though. Good. You were good at writing. You're good editors yesterday, and you're good at math. Okay, excellent. Good. We've got the bases covered, but we've got a few things to talk about in the budget. Okay. So let's see here. Now, I don't need to recreate the wheel if there are plenty useful wheels out on the internet. A lot of times, universities have great templates, especially for budgets and budget justifications. And I don't know the folks at SIU, but they have some nice templates there. And I'm just sharing that as a resource. You'll be able to check out some of the links that I have in these slides. But there's lots of less likely to find full drafts of project narratives around on the internet, but often, especially universities, will often have templates, and those are a great place to start. Now, you should always be using what is custom specifically to the opportunity that you're applying for, because different agencies might use a slightly different version of budget, but we're going to talk about kind of the basic categories. Okay, so when we're thinking about grant budgets, there's a lot of rules. And there are certainly many professionals who make it like their career to administer federal funding. And I like to compete for federal funding, but I'm not even the world's greatest expert in all of the rules. Luckily, there are other people here at Emory that know the rules, and they're focused on the rules and how you're allowed to spend money. But I just wanted to touch on kind of 2 components that will help sort of set the stage for how you're thinking about what you might need to budget for your project. And the first is this funny language about supplanting or supplantation and supplementing. Supplementation. I know they sound so similar and they even look similar. And sometimes when you're reading, you're like, oh, wait, what? Which one did they say? Okay. Supplanting, you're not allowed to do. Supplanting is when a grantee reduces funds for an activity because federal funds are available or are potentially available to fund that same activity. So if you have a nonprofit and you have a few revenue sources for your nonprofit, maybe you have donations, maybe you also have a service that you provide that collects a fee for that service, and you also are seeking federal fundings. The thing that you already pay for, if you're just doing that, you can't get federal funding to do the exact same thing and supplant that existing funding. Supplementing is okay. Supplementing occurs when federal funds are used to enhance or add to or expand existing funds for program activities. Because I know what you're thinking, Kim, yesterday you said it's better and will be more competitive if we're proposing something that we have experience doing. Yes, true. Very, very true. But you have to be doing more of that or providing a service in an expanded catchment area or doing something that is adding to the existing funds that exist for that program. So federal funds, basically, they're used to support the part that's new, the added part. If you already have funds, that should not be replaced by federal funding. Okay, so that's one big major thought process as you're going in to think about creating a federal budget. Then there's these three tests: allowability, allocability, and reasonableness. Could they make these words any less approachable? Hard to say. Allowable refers to the costs that conform to the federal guidelines. Is a cost allowed or not? Every federal program, they might have slightly different guidelines. Some institutes will not allow you to pay for food if you're having an internal meeting. Like if I meet with a person in the office next door to me, I can't pay for our lunch with federal funds. If I'm having a big conference and people are flying in from all over the country, and it would be like unreasonable to have all these people go to different places, pay for their lunches, come back, all this. Yes, you're allowed to pay for lunch, like at a conference. And that type of allowability rules, there are many, and they're slightly different by each agency, but you have to stay within what's allowable. Now, the costs have to be allocable. And the allocable aspect means that you can ascribe that cost to a specific federal award. So that it's not something that is supporting the entirety of your operation across many, many projects. Then it's probably getting wrapped into FNA, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. Oh gosh. And then that specific federal award. So I'm spending this dollar, I'm buying this subscription, I'm paying for this service, I'm paying for this person to conduct work that is specifically proposed on this particular federal award. That's the allocable fit. It's got to be that one-to-one fit. And then the reasonableness is a little bit more self-explanatory. Does the cost reflect what a prudent person, given similar circumstances, would pay for the goods or services being acquired with federal funds? So, like, is it reasonable? Like, hopefully, you didn't pay like an exorbitant amount for website design when there would have been many other providers who could have done it for a tenth of the cost, right? So that's the reasonableness. There are many, 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 many webinars and resources and all sorts of things online. Even if you are not administering research grants, I would still suggest resources from Society for Research Administrators International. They call it SRAI. And I linked a couple of their blog posts about allowability, allocability, reasonableness. They have lots of webinars online. And Cura is another one that also has, that's the National Consortium of University Research Administrators. That also has many resources. And even if you're not necessarily administering research grants, what they talk about in the context of following the rules for federal funding, there's a wealth of information out there, and you could spend many, many, many hours digging into this. And they offer all sorts of certifications and trainings if this is of interest to you. But what some nonprofits do is contract with an entity to be the administrator of the federal funds. Some nonprofits say, I don't know these rules and I don't plan to learn them really well. And so I'm going to contract with an entity that it like specifically is designed to work with many nonprofits and help them administer federal funds. So they are out there, they exist as well. So if all of a sudden felt really overwhelming to you, don't worry. There are places that you can turn either to build your own information and skill set, or to contract with and have them administer federal awards. But you got to get the award before this is the problem. So let's talk about the budget categories. When you are applying for a grant, there's usually a budget limit. Sometimes there's not, and you'll have to kind of figure out between the program officer and like what they funded before, what is a reasonable amount to request. But a lot of times it's very explicit. You may not request more than, and they'll tell you how much. We're going to walk through these categories, which are the pretty typical categories. Sometimes there might be a slightly different order or a slightly different set of categories depending on exactly which agency you're applying to and exactly which program. But these are usually pretty consistent. So personnel, these are the people. These are the people who are working on the project. And often there's a range of ways that you can add people to the project. If an individual is going to be working on a federal grant project, and that is not a part of their current job, then you can put a part of their time on that grant. And so say they're going to spend 10% of their time, you don't have to put the whole person on. You can put a percentage of time, even if they're an existing staff member. And I know you're thinking, wait, didn't you tell me I can't supplant federal funds? True, but they're doing a different activity. They're doing something new is the circumstance that I'm describing. So they're doing something new by taking on a role in this federal grant. You can put a portion of their time that reflects the commitment that they're going to make to that project in the personnel line. You can also hire people that are 100% on the project, depending on the size of the project. And sometimes you'll have lots of people listed. Sometimes you won't have lots of people listed. If an individual is currently employed by your organization, usually you're going to name them, you're going to describe you're going to explain their current title, and you're going to explain what they do for like one sentence. They oversee operations at our organization. Oh, great. Okay. And then you're going to explain how they're going to support the project. If they haven't been hired yet, if your plan is, I need to hire someone, I need to recruit someone to work on this project, then you would identify them as to be hired. And you would list the title that you intended to get them. This is going to be a project manager to be hired. They're going to do this type of work for the project. So that would be who you fit into personnel. There are sometimes some salary caps where if a person's salary is over a certain amount, the agency will say, we'll reimburse you 10% of their time if you're requesting 10% of their time, but only up to some stated salary cap that everybody gets capped at. So NIH has a stated salary cap, for example. Depends on the agency. Fringe benefits. Then usually your organization would have a fringe benefit rate, which is calculated based on a pool of your employees that includes things like your health benefits and your 401k benefits and things like that. And that is calculated based on the salary that you're requesting. So you would figure out salary and then you would apply the fringe benefit rate to the salary. Travel. Okay. So travel. Wait, before I move on. And when you're requesting salary for personnel, it can vary based on your organization, but it is okay if your organization has a process for doing either a cost of living adjustment each year, like you get a 2 or 3% adjustment, or if they have a process for adjusting based on merit, you get a 2 or 3, 4% adjustment each year. You can build that in to how you're projecting the salary. So you would start with the salary today, and then forward you would project it up that 2, 3, 4%. Sometimes agencies have a specific guideline about how to do that adjustment, but seeing a 3% increase year over year would not at all be unusual. Okay, travel. So travel, different agencies might want a little bit more detail or less deep detail. Once you get a rough sense of how to calculate this travel, then it becomes pretty routine. But the first time that you do it, you got to go to a few different websites and pull a few different pieces. So, and remember, never confuse a grant with real life. Sometimes you don't know where you're going to be traveling to. So for example, if you build into your project that you're going to travel to present at a conference, or you're going to travel to different sites that you need to visit, you might not know where exactly those sites are. You might not know where the next conference is going to be held for the professional society that you're interested in. So you have to make a guess. And you just have to use, like, you could use the most recent location, or you could use a location that is frequented by the conference, but you're just going to have to make a guess, a reasonable guess. And that's okay. You just make a reasonable guess, and that'll be fine. You're going to want to estimate flight. And I know, like, you have no idea what a flight is going to cost. But, okay, you're in Atlanta. If you've got to fly to Chicago or Detroit, like hub to hub, it's probably not that expensive. You can probably get there for $350. Yeah, that's what I would say. Like, you're just making a reasonable approach at getting a reasonable cost into the travel line. It's never going to be 100% perfect. But you want to think about flight. That's a guess. That's a guess. When you look at mileage, hotel, and ground transportation and per diem, those things are specifically listed on GSA.gov. So there's a website that you can go to that has these government rates for all of the cities in the US and other locations as well. And it will say, here's what you're allowed to request reimbursement for, and there's some ceiling. Some agencies, you have to stick to that exact ceiling. Some are a little bit more flexible about that, and the ceiling is kind of a guide. Some you have to stick to the ceiling unless you're traveling for a conference and you're staying in the conference hotel, then it's okay to go over on the hotel costs. Okay, it varies. But the GSA.gov website is going to tell you a price point for your hotel, for your mileage. It gives you a number of cents per mile. So I don't remember what it's up to anymore, but say it's 65 cents per mile. You can request that, and then it also will tell you it doesn't tell you ground transportation, but it will tell you a per diem rate, and you can build that in. So there is some of the costs you can just pull from GSA.gov. Ground transportation, you have to make a reasonable guess at. If you know you're driving the mileage, you're going to have to estimate that if you don't know which sites you're going to. But just pick a reasonable ballpark. If you're going to be driving around Georgia and you say, well, I'm probably going to do 6 site visits around the state of Georgia. Let's say on average, I'm going to drive 100 miles. Well, that's 200 miles there and back, 200 times 6, 1,200 miles times the mileage rate, 65 cents, whatever it is. That's what you would do. You would just have to make a reasonable guess at it. Now, anybody who's done grants for a while will tell you, depending on how this, when you're making your reasonable guess, you can make it a little tiny bit up, or you can make it a little tiny bit down. You won't be allowed to take that money unless you actually spend it. And so you just have to use your best guess at what's going to happen in the next year. The flight price is going to go up, or the flight price is going to go down. There's no real science to this. You just have to guess. Okay, equipment. Usually, equipment is only for cost 5,000 and up, and some agencies might have gone to 10,000 and up. But anyway, this is not your laptop. This is more like durable equipment. You're buying a piece of machinery or something like that. Supplies, that's where your laptop goes. This is where you need some giant sticky notes to facilitate meetings. You need notepads, you need pens, you need incentives that you're going to have printed with your logo. Sometimes that's allowed. It would really depend on the circumstances. And that's going to be what you put into supplies. Your contractual or consultant are going to be payments for consultants. So if you need to work with someone who's doing a very specific piece of work that's maybe not central to the overall project, then they can be a consultant. So for example, if I have like my project, I'm working with emerging research institutions from all across the US. Well, I might have a consultant cost for website design. And that's not really central to the overall project. It's something that I need to pay somebody to do, but they don't work for me. They're not in personnel. Personnel are only people who either currently work for you or you're going to hire as an organization. Consultant are for individuals who are making a specific contribution that isn't as large or as central to the overall conduct of the project. Now, subawards, sometimes consultant versus subawards can get a little tricky. Subawards are made to other organizations when they are playing a larger role in your project. And whether someone fits into consultant or subaward can kind of depend a lot on the circumstances. But the core difference is, are they doing something like really important and central to the project? Or do they have a pretty defined niche and delivery that they need to do? And then, and it changes a little bit how whether it's a consultant or subawards need to provide more documentation up front. And consultants usually have a lower burden of providing information up front. And that's usually handled by a contract on the other side if an award is actually made. Construction is really only used in construction grants. And oh man, if you're doing construction, hopefully you're working with somebody who knows how to develop and estimate a construction budget. You also sometimes have participant and trainee costs. These are only used in specific research and training programs, and there's going to be specific guidance from that agency about how to include that. And it's very, very specific. Many of the standard budget templates that the agencies use would not have participant trainee. It's only some of these like research and training programs, and you would see some specific instructions about that. Similarly, only included on SBIR STTR awards if you are a for-profit business, then you can include this fee. It's like this extra bonus fee that the small business, only if you're a for-profit business. So probably not applicable to many of you. Then there is a category for other, and that can include anything else. Using other or not, if it can fit into one of the categories above, it should fit into one of the categories above. If it really, really doesn't fit, then it can go in other. But you want to put it into the categories above first. Then there's indirect costs, or otherwise known as facilities and administration. There's lots of discussion about what the indirect cost rate is going to be. Different agencies have taken different approaches to this. If you are new to the scene, then you might be taking your de minimis rate, which is a minimum rate that is accessible to anyone applying for federal funds, basically. Otherwise, if you do this a lot, you might develop a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. That's the NICRA acronym there, where you calculate and provide 1,000 pages, hundreds of pages of documentation explaining why you're requesting a higher rate. Or TBD. Right now, there's lots of discussion about how that rate should be calculated and how that should be presented in federal applications. But right now, either pretty much you have an indirect rate, you're taking the de minimis rate, or there is a way that you can calculate it at submission. And then you're following a specific set of instructions. But this F&A rate, remember when I talked about allocable costs? This F&A rate is meant to capture the costs that you have to spend to conduct sponsored work, but aren't allocable to a single project. The classic example is electricity. You have to pay. There, work is happening. Work is happening at your site, and you need to pay for electricity, but there's no way for you to segment what your electricity costs are, what your utility costs are, as directly related, as allocable to this one particular sponsored project. And so that's where you do a calculation to say, well, this is our overall spend, and here's what we usually spend on utilities, and here's what percentage came from the federal work, and we'd like that equivalent percentage back so that we can pay our utilities bill. That is basically what F&A is aimed at capturing. They're real expenses that have already been paid, already been incurred by the organization, and the organization is basically asking for reimbursement for that percentage of expenses that would relate to the sponsored work. Okay, grant, budget, development strategy. So, first thing, know if your budget request affects your competitiveness. Usually, it would not for grants. It sometimes maybe. Bids are different though. Like if you're bidding for something, then you're saying I can provide it for this cost, and somebody else is going to say, well, I can provide that for this cost. And then your budget request would actually affect your competitiveness. But most of the time, if you're applying for a grant, it's not going to affect your competitiveness as long as you're under whatever limit they have stated in the RFP. Now, many grants are going to give you that budget limit, or you got to look at previously funded awards and kind of figure out where do you think that limit is. Maybe you have a conversation with the program officer. Now, define your project. You've got to have that understanding of your scope of work. So, going back to yesterday, I told you first thing you got to do is you got to define your project. Then you start looking for funding. But now we're going to hone that project based on the RFP that we're reviewing, that we've made the go go, no go decision. We've decided to go. We've decided to apply. We're going to do it. So now we're thinking about it. You have to have a good understanding of what you're going to propose. That after that conceptual development aspect, you've thought about it. You've figured out what you need to do. A great next step is to develop your budget. That's going to help you figure out, am I thinking of the right scope or do I need to scale back? And how much do I need to scale back? I personally like to start with what I call the golden goose budget. Put in every single cost, every single bell and whistle, every single nice to have that is reasonable, that is allowable, that is allocable to the project. But like, I want to see it all in there. I want to put what I think would be an amazing project. It would really achieve the purpose as stated in the RFP. It aligns well and leverages the strengths that my organization has. I'm designing that budget that's going to help me do the big picture. All with fullest project scope that you would be reasonable for you to propose. Put it all in there. Think about it in two ways. Walk through the budget categories, walk through each one. Well, who do I need on this? Where do I need to travel? Walk through those. And then think about it in kind of your work plan. Just thinking, just brainstorming. Okay, well, I want to do this project. Did I capture that in the budget categories? I want to do this activity. Did I capture that? I want to do this activity. Did I capture that? Did I get to that objective? Did I capture that? See your total. If it's not more than what you're allowed to ask for, then you're not dreaming big enough, is my opinion. So see your total. If you have done this right, you're going to need to start cutting back then. I cannot think of a time when I didn't have to cut a proposal in some kind of way. Even when you're pretty close, there's probably still something you got to I've got to cut back a little bit just to make sure that I'm staying within the budget limitations or I'm staying within the guidelines. Then readjust your vision, right? Make sure as you cut things out that you're conceptually removing those activities. And that's going to get you then to the right scope that you're going to go right into your work plan, etc. So that's my approach to developing a budget. And we'll be able to then take some Q&A about this. Okay, budget justification. I think this should be called budget explanation because you're not actually, usually this is an unscored section and it's a very simplistic explanation of costs. You're not trying to actually convince anybody or justify anything. Don't expand the narrative. Sometimes it's only 1 or 2 pages. Even for large multi-million-dollar budgets, it is sometimes only 1 or 2 pages. Many reasonable examples online. Here I'm sharing an example from MIT, and it's really simple statements. As we were walking through the budget categories, you're saying this person leads my operations. They're going to oversee the overall execution of the project. This is the percentage of time I'm requesting. That's it. You don't need to say more than that usually. I'm going to fly here on, just as I was saying, I'm going to drive to 6 sites. On average, it's going to be 200 miles round trip, 1,200 miles for the year times the mileage reimbursement. That's it. That's all you have to say. And hopefully then in your work plan, you've explained like the 6 sites that you're visiting and why you're going there, but you don't explain that in the justification. It's just an explanation of the numbers. That's it. And there's lots of examples online. Okay. So concludes the budget discussion. We'll end up getting to more of this in Q&A, I'm sure. Now we're going to move to the evaluation plan. So I'm going to launch poll 3. And now I'm interested, how are you feeling about the evaluation plan? How are you feeling about this? Let's get a sense of how confident we are in developing the eval plan. We're thinking. Okay, let's see those results. How confident do we feel about the evaluation plan? Working. We're loading. Let's see. Okay, all right. You guys are feeling a little bit better about this. The budget made you nervous. So we're more mid. We're more mid on this. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. What makes you, oops, poll four. What makes you the most nervous about developing an eval plan? We'll launch poll four here. Candace, will you launch poll four for us? Maybe not. That's all right. That's all right. I have a bad joke to tell, so we can move on to the bad joke. These people, they got it. They got the eval. So a few people want it, but we're gonna talk. Guess what? Have I got? I've got the number one tip for. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now we talk about. We're getting your feedback. Go ahead. There's poll four. What makes you the most nervous about developing the evaluation plan? All right. Let's see those results. Let's see. People are still voting. They're busy clicking every single option. They really want. Aha. Ooh, creating metrics and writing the statistical analysis section. All right. That was a little bit of a trick. A lot of times you don't need to write the statistical analysis section. So, whew, cross that one off. I will explain in a second. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. I gotcha. Okay. Tip number one. Best tip that I have for you. Find a professional evaluator and have them write the evaluation section and design the logic model. This happens all the time. Tell me you have a toddler without telling me you have a toddler. You include a GIF of Blippi in your presentation. Okay. So I'm telling you, they'll do this. Professional evaluators engage. Oh, good. We got some people who have toddlers and they really like Blippi. Excellent. I don't like the Blippi copycats. Blippi OG only, please. Professional evaluators, if you talk to them at the proposal stage, you're drafting your proposal. If you're going to write them into the budget to conduct the evaluation of the project, they're going to get paid if the project's funded. Often they will write the eval section and design the logic model for your proposal. This is the best thing going, let me tell you. Now, I can't tell you that every single evaluator that you know does that. And I'm sure there's some professional evaluators who are like cringing at me saying this, but all of the professional evaluators that I have worked with personally, this is how they operate. I'm sure there are many different ways of operating, but the ones I have worked with have operated in this way. The evaluator would provide you with a budget that you would include in your budget request. Maybe that's on the consultant line, maybe that's as a sub-award, depending on how involved that individual is. And you would have to have the project scope and work plan finalized early enough for the evaluator to write the eval plan and give you the budget request justification. Ah, yes, the 3 evaluators gave hearts to that. You have to have it done in enough time before the deadline, usually a few weeks, in order for the evaluator to engage in this way. So you've got to set aside space in the narrative, and you have to set aside space in the budget for eval. Sometimes a rule of thumb I occasionally hear is setting aside 10, 15, up to 20% of a project budget for evaluation. Evaluators range greatly. It always depends on the scope of what you're asking them to do. But if you are concerned about writing the eval plan, you find yourself somebody to partner with you. And some will definitely write that section if you're going to include them in the budget. Great strategy. Okay. All right. So let's think back to the work plan yesterday. I talked about the goals. Remember, I said, don't confuse a grant with real life. We got to do a little bit of simplification. This is a 2D piece of paper. There's only so much complexity we can convey here. Your goals are the organizing structure, and they should be distinct from each other. And you're going to embed your objectives that are the major milestones to support that goal under it. And then the activities are going to bed under that. This work plan should map exactly to your logic model. And your work plan to logic model translation is a great place to start thinking about your eval plan. So the logic model, there are hundreds of examples online. If you Google logic model, you will find many. Your agency might have a particular flavor that they recommend. Sometimes they'll include a link of, here's some examples of logic models. Great, use those. Usually these are sort of the column headers: inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes. Sometimes those are split into short-term and mid-term outcomes. Impact, sometimes that's called long-term outcomes. It depends. But your inputs are basically the persons and resources that you need. The activities are going to be the activities that you wrote in your work plan. The outputs, those are usually the activity-based metrics. And a lot of times it's counting how many meetings, how many people attended, how many conferences, how many individuals were you able to serve, how many hours did you get dedicated doing to something. It's often how many. And then your outcomes are usually based on your objectives. And then they all line up to your goals. So you can have multiple activities, you can have multiple metrics, you can have multiple inputs, you can have multiple objectives, but then usually if you've structured your work plan, you're kind of feeding that all into one goal and saying, this is the goal I'm trying to achieve based on these objectives, activities, and inputs. And I'll show you this example that I was working on improve emergency preparedness at the elementary school. So my daughter is at Parkside Elementary in the Jackson cluster, and we had a meeting about emergency preparedness at the school. We were listening to the principal, and I was finishing my presentation for today. So this is why I was thinking about that. So if our goal is improve emergency preparedness at the school, then here I've got some objectives. We got to incorporate 5-year plans. This is not real, not based on Parkside. I was just thinking about that while I was typing. Incorporate 5-year plans into the infrastructure, and got to incorporate into the school budget by the end of year 1. We want 100% of staff and students to participate in emergency drills by the end of the year 1. We want awareness of emergency preparedness procedures among the parents to increase by the end of year 1. Okay, and the activities we're going to do is draft some plans, present them at the school budget hearing. I don't know if that's what it's called, but you get the idea. We're going to conduct some drills 4 times a year, and we're going to create and disseminate emergency preparedness messages in a monthly parent newsletter. And then the evaluation metrics, I'm just counting. Okay, so I said 6, we're going to draft 6. And then I'm counting how 6 emergency plans were drafted by month 2 and presented at the budget hearing. I said we were going to do quarterly drills, and just counting 4 emergency drills. And then I said I was going to disseminate messages in a monthly newsletter. Well, 12 emergency preparedness messages were disseminated, right? So this is how I've structured the work plan. And then this would be how I structure the logic model. It's the exact, the addition that we didn't see on the work plan is the inputs here. So I said school administration, teachers, parents, local first responders, local emergency preparedness experts. We need all of them to be involved. And the activities are the same things that I listed on that work plan. Those are then the outputs are those counting. How many of each of the activities that I proposed. And the outcomes are based on the objectives, all moving towards improving emergency preparedness at the school. So this is the logic model. I think usually the logic, getting your work plan and translating it to the logic model is the first step in developing an evaluation plan. Sometimes other people might start in different places, but I think translating your work plan to the logic model in this way really helps you think through and see where maybe you had a gap in activities or you weren't as smart objectives. But you guys said you knew smart objectives. You didn't have your SMART objectives as crisp as you wanted, so you're having trouble translating that to an outcome. So you go back and you can modify your work plan to make it fit the evaluation that you're thinking about better. Sometimes it helps to go back and forth, but I like to start with that evaluation plan. And then when I get into actually writing the narrative portion of the evaluation plan, I'm really often looking at that logic model and saying, what did I say I was going to capture? In the evaluation plan, you're basically describing the sources and the methods or process that you're going to use to capture the outputs and outcomes that you proposed in your logic model, analyze them, review them in some way with some group of people, and then change or improve or make decisions based on you tracking that outcome. You want to make sure that you're explaining how you're going to do those 4 steps. Sometimes people will explain how they're capturing it, but then not what they're going to do with that information. You gotta follow it full circle. Sometimes in healthcare they would talk about plan, do, study, act. There's other types of kind of cyclical quality improvement circles, but capture, yes, you do need to do that part, but you have to then analyze, review, and then explain how that will inform your decision making. So I have some example text here, and these are just examples that I made up that are, you might be meeting with others. Maybe there's a survey that you need to do. You're reviewing documents. Again, I haven't presented any statistics in these because if you're proposing a research project, then yes, you're probably going to be presenting more detailed statistical analyses. But for a lot of service delivery projects that you might be working on, you often are not going to be presenting statistics because you're not necessarily testing a hypothesis. You're implementing a service and trying to assess, were you able to do that? And then did it make a difference? And the did it make a difference question, there's a lot of different ways to get at that. So just as an example, highlight a few things in this annual evaluation report. Okay, there's going to be an evaluation report. The team is going to feature a single slide dashboard. It's going to display key metrics, and they're going to summarize the activities of the cohort and present then activity and metrics for each cohort institutional member. So each member of the cohort is going to have a profile about them, and the team will conduct document review. So this is document review, like you're looking at meeting attendance, you're looking at progress reports, you're looking at other things that got written down, as well as interviews and surveys conducted over the past year. It's going to include a synthesis. with that will highlight lessons learned and insights from the past year and best practices, as well as key quality improvement initiatives and progress made on those initiatives. And then you'll use that to identify major strategies to be altered or updated over the upcoming year. This is some of the types of language that you would expect to see in that kind of full circle of, okay, yes, we're going to collect the information. Maybe over here, we're talking about the process that we're going to use to actually pull out the information. But importantly, we're going to review it and either make some decisions or figure out how to improve or identify strategies that need to be implemented over the upcoming year. So this is like your brief intro to evaluation planning, hopefully some helpful examples and understanding that crosswalk between the work plan and the logic model is useful. And now we're going to touch a little bit on competitiveness, and then we're going to get to Q&A. Okay. I might be like a little bit competitive, just a little bit, yeah. Have you ever done one of those workplace like strengths finders? I did one, like this is like 20 years ago. And one of my strengths, they frame everything as having like pros and cons, right? So one of my strengths though is competition. And it says comparison is your lens to the world. Weighing things against a standard words like better and worse is easier for you to understand exactly how good something is. You don't settle for better, you settle for being the best. Okay, all right. Maybe a little bit competitive. I like to win. Okay, I like to win. If I had a theme song, sometimes it would be All I Do Is Win. Other times it would be the Imperial March, which is the music that plays when Darth Vader walks in. So just be glad you don't have to work for me. Like that's it. Just be glad you don't have to work for me. Competitive intelligence is ethical collection of information used to inform decision making for your organization. So in the context of preparing a grant application and you're thinking about, should I apply or not? Like, what kind of competitive intelligence do I have here? Like two big questions come up. One is, how does your organization and project idea stack up against the review criteria? You guys thought that was really funny. And I'm wondering what part you're reacting to. Maybe it's the Darth Vader part, or maybe it's, I said, you to be glad you don't work for me. Okay. Like, how does you stack up against the review criteria? That's one big question. And then how does your organization and project idea stack up against anticipated competitors? And we talked a little bit about why I said never tell me the odds, because if you can create a really strong project against the review criteria, I think you should apply regardless of the odds, even if there's only going to be one in the country. That's my personal approach to applying. The project ideas and how you stack up against competitors, not only are you making a decision about apply or not, but I also mention sometimes you end up making a decision about, should I lead or should I partner? So just a few slides on this. Competitiveness. This is my top recommendation. If you want to figure out how well you are doing compared to the review criteria, the best thing going is a red team review. That's when you convene a group of leaders and other experts who did not write the proposal. And you say, before I submit this thing, you want them to read it and review it against the review criteria the agency is saying they're going to use, and they're going to offer some constructive criticism. This is a pencils down period for authors. And the feedback can sometimes be pretty direct, but it is the best way, I think, to really take a step back, have some people who are arm's length from the project, didn't write the proposal, really take a look and evaluate it and score it with the scoring system that is going to be used by the funder. Now, to do this, you got to have the draft done early enough for the red team to read it and score it, and the authors make significant adjustments. So when I'm working with researchers at Emory, I tell them if they're going to red team, they should red team 6 weeks before the deadline. Six weeks. Sometimes we only have 6 weeks to apply, but because there's lots of reasons for that, but you want to give it to the red teamers for at least a week or two in my context. And then you want to have a week or two to respond to that. And then you need a couple weeks before the deadline to make sure everything is final. But you need time to do this, but it is the best way to figure out to improve your competitiveness is to actually write the proposal, score it against the review criteria, and see where you can improve. This is way after you've made the go decision. And this isn't informing the go decision. This is trying to improve your competitiveness. Now, how does your organization stack up against the anticipated competitors? I'm gonna introduce you to a new phrase, perhaps. Open source intelligence. Sometimes I talk about this. It sounds really fancy, and it's like abbreviated OSINT, and like that sounds cool, but really it just means that I Google something. And so things that I might Google that help me understand what my competitors might do, and then black hat against them. So who has won in the past is really helpful to understand. And if this is something that awardees have to recompete after every few years, they have an award for 5 years and they got to go recompete it, then you want to understand if they're adding new awardees or you actually have to displace a current awardee in order to get awarded. And sometimes you don't know that information, but a lot of times you can figure it out. Now, the other question is sometimes who's likely to apply? And if you can figure out who might be likely to apply, you can think through, this is kind of a thought experiment, where you think through, if I'm the other applicant that I'm competing against, what are my strengths? And then if I'm applying as my organization, how can I present my organization and our differentiators as being a better, more optimal fit than who I think my competitor is? And this is something that, this is advanced, and you don't want to get bogged down in this, but it can play in the back of your mind as you're working those differentiators and description into your organizational capacity. This can turn into the difference of do you win or do you lose in a very, very close race. Okay, I'm going to just tell you one more thing. More about competitiveness. This can help inform the lead versus partner, and maybe even some of your differentiators. And I added this last night because many of you were asking about new organizations. What if you're new? And I just wanted to point out that nonprofit organizations have to disclose something called a 990, and it's part of their tax forms. I mean, it's weird to get excited about reviewing another organization's tax form, but these are all publicly available, OSINT. You can Google it. And this is for the zoo. I'm a member of the zoo. We live near the zoo. You think you buy the membership, it's not very expensive. You buy the membership and then you're like, oh, we'll go to the zoo. It's free. We have a membership. No, it's not free. You have to pay for parking. Somehow I've bought 3 soft pretzels and 2 Dippin' Dots, and I'm carrying a stuffed lemur out, and it's $200 later. So that's how they get you. Okay, but anyway, the information in their annual reports and sometimes in the 990 can help you understand what some other nonprofit organizations might be doing in a space that's related to yours. Sometimes you might be looking at them as a potential partner, and you can see, oh, they have done this grant and they have these opportunities. Or here you can see combined contributions and grants, which can include grants they've received as well as donations that they've received. But you're like, oh, wow, they have 15 million in donations, and they have this kind of revenue. Have they given out grants? Yes, you can see that they've given out grants, and to the tune of 288,000 this year. So maybe there are opportunities for you to get a grant from that organization. There's lots and lots. I mean, these are big documents often, but you can see a little bit more information about other nonprofits. And I think it's helpful if you're considering partnering to dig a little bit deeper into, well, how is this organization structured? What are they highlighting in their annual reports? What do their finances look like? Does it seem like they're going to be a good lead or good partner? And so I'm just introducing this as this extra resource that is openly available and nonprofits have to disclose. And sometimes if you're looking at other cities, like maybe you're filling a gap in the Atlanta metro area, but you want your organization to develop into an organization in another city. You can find out this information about an organization that you aspire to be like, for example. So lots of ways to use this. I love looking up a good 990 every once in a while. Okay. Last poll, and then we're going to do Q&A. Did you learn something about grant writing today? Let's see. Let's find out. There was one person I disappointed yesterday and didn't learn anything. But let's see. Let's see if everyone learned something about grant writing today. Yeah, then we're going to turn to Q&A. I see it coming in. See the Q&A coming in. All right, let's see. What are the results? All right, we got 3 people who said not much, but most people said yes, or somewhat or a lot. All right, very good. Most people learned something today. Very good. Okay, let's stop share. And if you didn't learn what you were hoping to learn, then maybe you can ask your Q&A. Okay. Once a grant is awarded, are there any protections from the current or next administration from withdrawing or clawing it back? Oh boy. Well, that sure is complicated, and I don't think we have time to answer that question exactly today. Please read the latest presidential memo. Can you provide more information about the fee for for-profit applicants? Yes, that's in the SBIR's TTR mechanism. If you're proposing research and you are a small business concern, you can include that 7% profit. Are approved federal grants listed for public providing agency payout amounts? Provide the website. Each agency handles that a little differently. They publish the list a little differently. You would want to go to each agency and see what grant. So NSF award search, you can Google that. It'll come right up. That's where you can find all of the awards they've made. NIH Reporter has all of the awards they've made. But then like Department of Defense does not publish all of the awards that they've made in one centralized location. So it varies based on the agency. Since travel costs will likely increase, is there a reasonable range for travel expenses? So you can, whatever the travel expense is today, a reasonable approximation of the future, yes, increasing by 10%, totally fine. Would you discuss the possibility of being award grants for a community organization that is not a 501c3? A community organization that is not a 501c3. So there are other types of nonprofits that are different 501c number, and I don't know them by heart. And then there's for-profit businesses. So I don't know what type of community organization they're referring to, but it would all come down to the stated eligibility criteria in the specific RFP that you're interested in. Sometimes the RFP will specify you must be a 501c3. And then if you're a different type of designation, you are not eligible to apply. Other times it will say you must be a nonprofit organization. And then any kind of nonprofit organization, regardless of what specific, tax type of entity it is, would be eligible to apply. And then sometimes they'll say many different types of entities, and they'll list them: for-profit businesses, institutions of higher education, local government, and they'll list many, many, many types of organization. It all comes down to whatever the eligibility is in that specific RFP. If the project requires an increase in marketing software seats, where would software subscription costs go? I would probably put that under other. And when you buy like a new seat, you can pay for that incremental cost, but then that seat can only exclusively be used for that, the activity related to that grant. Is there any organization that could help with grant writing with no fees for small businesses? So yes, there is an entity. I think, oh man, what is it called? There is an entity, and I want to say that it's based at Georgia Tech that helps small businesses, and is available to consult on like SBRs, STTRs, or other types of funding opportunities for small businesses. So I think it's the Georgia Tech Small Business something. Where do we find these people? I don't know what that was in reference to. Are there any grant monies for rental assistance? So most likely that would not be a grant. That would be like individual assistance. And that would be a different type of federal program, federal support. Is there an opportunity to be assigned to mentors that will walk a new grant applicant through the end-to-end process? This is great information, but I think it will be most effective to work with someone who has had success in the multiple stages of being grant ready. Yes, I agree. It is really helpful to have a mentor. I would encourage you to reach out to complementary nonprofits and really develop your network locally of individuals that are working doing complementary work to yours, as well as sometimes nationally, there might be other organizations that are doing work similar to yours, but in different cities. And that would be, a great way to walk through this, is to identify a mentor at another organization that would be able to walk with you one by one. Can I use AI doing the evaluation plan? So NIH recently came out and said, you cannot use AI to generate your proposal, otherwise we're throwing it out. And they also put a cap on how many an individual investigator can submit. So I think AI is a tool, and I would encourage you to use the tool with caution. Generative AI is like, it's good at some things, not great at other things, and good at summarizing existing content, not always super precise in my experience, because I keep testing it to see if it will do my job for me, and I can't get it to do that yet. So AI can be a tool, but if you have a good, thorough review and a good understanding of what it's spitting back out, it might be able to save you some time. But, as of right now, it can't. Somebody's going to pick it apart. The evaluator on the other side of the table, once it goes to review panel, is going to be able to tell that it was AI generated. How do we identify authors that can review and red team for us? So sometimes that might be other leaders in your organization. It might be close colleagues that you trust a lot, emphasis on the trust. And again, that network can be really helpful. So sometimes if you're looking for individuals outside of your organization to come in and give you a red team review, you might provide them a little bit of honorarium, like a small amount of compensation for their work. Or if you have a really close relationship and they're a mentor and invested in your development, maybe they'll do that for free. But, I think developing that mentor network, both locally as well as nationally, is really helpful. Any tips, websites on locating a professional evaluator? There is I know that there is like an Atlanta Evaluator Network, and I don't remember the exact name of it, but it has the words like Atlanta Program Evaluator Network, something like that. So if you Google something like that, you should find it. SWOT analysis, someone says. Perhaps. Okay, when it comes to the process of applying for a grant, do they offer only one slot open to apply, or do they have multiple opening at one company? Okay. So I think what you're describing is what we call limited submissions. And this is when an agency says, they push out the RFP, they say this opportunity is out there, but an organization can only submit one application. And so then you as the organization, that's my office, has to figure out, all right, who wants to apply? And we collect some initial information, and then we decide who is the most likely to be competitive, and we allow that one to move forward after an internal review. The limited submission version of applications is less typical. It can happen, but every agency has a slightly different approach. So that is a thing that happens. But then some agencies say, apply. Send us however many applications you think are good. And it varies greatly, but unless there is a stated limitation, and the limitations can be by organization, and sometimes they can be by the principal investigator, principal director. Like as principal director, you might only be allowed to submit one proposal, and you can't submit more than one with that same individual, but another individual from the organization could submit. So there are different versions of that limited submission. But if it's not limited, then as long as you're submitting distinct proposals, meaning proposals that are different from each other, you don't want to send the same one in twice, then if there's not an explicit stated limit, then you should be good as long as you're submitting non-redundant applications. Can you recommend a grant writing nonprofit? I'm not sure what that means exactly, grant writing nonprofit, but if you send it a clarification, I might be able to help you. Okay. Ooh, all right, some spam in there. All right. Can you point in the right direction to start a nonprofit? No. So I'm really focused on grant writing, and I know a lot of you had questions about early formation of nonprofits. But again, what I would say is what I said yesterday, and that is really clearly understand your differentiators and the gap that you're filling in the ecosystem. But there are some local nonprofit networks, and getting connected to some of the Atlanta local nonprofit networks is a great way to start to build your community and understand who's out there and what kind of services they're providing. Okay. Yesterday, you mentioned a website name for grant writing software. Okay. It is called Cayuse, and it's not grant writing software. This is grants management software. Unfortunately, I haven't found software straight up write my grants yet. Cayuse is spelled Cayuse, and it is a popular grants management software. Okay, good. So Crystal is telling me UGA helps with small businesses. So there's one at UGA, and I feel like there's one at Georgia Tech for those that were asking about small businesses. Small Business Development Center. There you go. Okay, great. I didn't hear a response to my question. All right. Since travel costs will likely increase over time, what is the range that we can use? And oh yes, and I said, yes, you just have to make a reasonable projection. So 5 to 10% increase is fine. Yes. Okay. If I had a nonprofit business that helps unhoused people, are there grants for community help like food pantry or rental assistance? Well, okay, so this is there's probably a combination of programs where if you're one organization and you're providing different types of services, you might need to look at different grants for those different aspects of your organization. And this individual is also asking specifically about rental assistance, which is probably not going to be a grant, probably going to be a different type of assistance, a different type of federal assistance that may or may not be administered by the state. I actually don't know the details of that, but that's probably not a grant. So you're probably looking at a few different streams of resources. How do you share intellectual property with prospective partners as a startup? So, if you have intellectual property and you have gone through the process of patenting it, then the way you would share it generally is through a license. So if you have IP, then your startup could license that IP and then be able to do something with it. That would be a one way, typical way. I don't know if there's any other details. And then UGA, someone is telling us, UGA has great free support for small business development and a certificate in nonprofit with the School of Social Work. Okay, all righty. Do I have knowledge of SCORE in Atlanta? No, I don't. I don't know about SCORE. I don't think I know about SCORE. Okay, I am scrolling through and I think I have answered all of the questions that I'm able to answer. So I think we are wrapped up. All right. That is it. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us again, seeing me again, coming back and hanging out with me this whole time. Really great to be a part of Hope Week.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining day 2 of Congressman Johnson's Week of Hope Grants Workshop. My name is Marcus Garza, and I serve as the Congressman's Chief of Staff in our Washington, D.C. office. It was our pleasure to host you for today's session. I want to thank Dr. Kimberly Eck of Emory University for delivering today's stellar seminar. We hope today's information has given you plenty of ideas on how best to set up your organization to stand out and stand ahead in a sea of competing applicants. Now, you won't want to miss day 3 of our grants workshop as we enter uncharted waters at the federal level with longstanding streams of grant funding drying up overnight or being clawed back. Tomorrow's panel will focus on looking beyond Washington to find new sources to help you fill in the gaps and keep your organizations running strong. We will be joined by Ms. Margaret Adams of the United Way of Greater Atlanta, State Representative Doreen Carter of Georgia House District 93, Ms. Brittany Kohler of the National League of Cities, and Mr. Will Sellers of Wholesale Wave, Georgia. We hope you will join us for what promises to be another wonderful and productive conversation. With that, this concludes today's program. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon.